All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you all that are watching the recording later, it's great to have you on the program. We're looking forward to seeing everybody. And this is for the program we're doing in November 5th through the 10th, isn't it, Tessa? And
Yes.
this is the architectural recording and preservation program that Tessa Honeycutt is running. And before, what we're going to do today is do a little bit of background on Montpelier, some background history of the different historic periods, and get into what power replaces, and then talk a little bit about the DuPont history as well. But prior to getting started on that, I think, Tessa, you've got some things you wanted to let people know about. And if anybody has any questions about the program, like what to bring, what to expect, what the weather's like in November when we do this, that would be great. And Tessa can address that. So thanks for being here, Tessa.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you all for coming out. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping you all are looking forward to it. It's gonna be a great week. So a few little announcement things. I will be sending you all a link in either today or tomorrow for a guest lecture that I have lined up for November 2nd at 7 p.m. It's going to be over Zoom. I have a lady she's a recent USC grad. She actually used some of the work we've been doing at Montpelier for her thesis, but she'll be talking about the preservation of Rosenwald schools in Virginia and Tennessee. So I think it'd be a great opportunity to get us thinking about preservation, and not only how preservation works here at Montpelier, but in the greater state area, and looking at a type of building that we see in a bunch of different states kind of around the South in this area. And then I will also be adding to the folder that Matt sent y'all last week, I think, like a guide to how to download SketchUp software. So we will be, the last day of the program, we'll be working on some like 3D modeling. I'll show you how to 3D model buildings, and we'll kind of work on that. So the software, you can get a free trial of it. So I will put the instructions on how to download that. And if you can go ahead and get that downloaded before you come, that would be great. And on that same note, if you have a laptop, please bring it. If you have a camera, bring that, because we're going to be doing some photo documentation. But if you don't, like, no worries. But yeah, where I'm hoping for good weather, and I'm excited. We're going to be documenting a race barn and hopefully the Doc Madison house. So I'm really looking forward to it.
And Tessa, remind me to put you in a text with Gaines Haney, so you can be communicating with him about the house, because the Madison Washington house is a house that was probably built around 1859 or 60, and is kind of the counterpoint architecturally to Arlington House. But it was this is the same. It was arranged to be built by Dr. James A. Madison, who was the great nephew of James Madison. But James A. Madison is the person that sold the land to the Gilmores, which is really cool. So, but yeah, and then be able to have a model of that in the in all the everything we have would be amazing. So, and
Yes.
Tessa's developed some really cool models with the help of the last expedition, and then also just doing this doing photography with some of the volunteers that came from last time's program, and some good stuff. So anything to suggest to bring? I know I've got the general things to bring, like boots, work boots, for so you don't step on nails, that kind of thing. Tessa has some fun stories on that.
Yeah. So definitely bring work boots, bring gloves, bring a mask, especially, some of these houses, but the Dr. Madison house is lived in, so interior wise, shouldn't be an issue, but like the race barn is not used. So just be aware that we're kind of be going in buildings that are no longer used. There might be a lot of dust, bugs, be prepared for all those things, because these are houses that are deteriorating, like they're not in current use, and that's why we need to document them. Yeah, and otherwise, if you have any
folding chairs, I think would be good, because We
Yes.
usually eat lunch at the area where we are, and we don't have chairs out there. So if you're driving and you have a favorite folding chair, bring it. If you're flying, don't worry about it. We have plenty of folding chairs we could bring. But if you do
Yeah.
have a fave folding chair, that'd be
Mhm.
great to have.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, and if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask me now, or if you can send an email to Dig about anything, and I will
Mhm.
get back to you. We will be spending a lot of time in the field, so be prepared for that. Bring your sunscreen. Um, you know, we'll be outside for a good portion of every day. So
Hey, Dean. Oh, you're muted, Dean. Hey, Dean, you're muted.
Yeah, the app, the app that that we're going to be downloading, should I download it on my iPad or my laptop or both?
I would recommend your laptop.
Okay.
That I know it can be downloaded on an iPad, but I don't know how to actually use the software on an iPad because I've never. I know iPads work a little
Okay.
bit differently than laptops
So,
do.
so you think the laptop would work better for that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Well, I think last spring when somebody had it on the iPad, that was a failure. So,
Yeah, yeah. It works a little clunky
That's
on the
before I
iPad.
Okay, and then you said a camera is an iPhone camera okay, or do you require something more a little bit more
That's
sophisticated?
fine. But I would say if you have something a little more sophisticated, um, it might be useful to bring it. But if
Hmm.
you don't, like an iPhone can also take really great pictures. So
yeah. Don't go out
Okay.
and buy a camera, Dean. It's just, that's, yeah. What I think last time there was a couple of people that were like photo aficionados, and it was amazing because they had cameras that they used all the time and were familiar with. But I'd say bring whatever you're familiar with and most comfortable with.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I think
yeah,
Tessa,
yeah.
you might be locked up. I'm not sure, Tessa. You're frozen.
Oh.
So, but well, cool. We'll go. Anything else, Tessa?
I think that's all for me. So I'll probably go ahead and hop off. But like I said, if you have any questions, email Dig and somebody will send it to me and I can answer it. So
Yeah, I'll send it. I'm checking Dig now, so I'll get those to you, Tessa.
okay, perfect. Thanks. And I look forward to seeing everybody in a few weeks.
Thanks, Tessa. Bye. All right. So what I wanted to do at this point was to give you all a little bit of background on Montpelier and look at the kind of this idea of power of place. For many of you all that have been to Montpelier, you've got familiarity with the Madison era and the landscapes that we've been exploring and the buildings we've been exploring through archaeology. And what you all are going to be learning more about this time is the DuPont era, which is the last over at this point 120 years of history from the early 20th century on. And actually with the Doc Madison House, that's a building that was built in the 1850s. So it's post Madison, but has the antebellum into the early 20th century. Some exciting stuff. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share screens with you all, and let's see. And I'm going to hide meeting controls. And what I've got, what y'all should be able to see is the map of the property here. Y'all can see that. And I think I want to make sure that let me stop sharing screens. I am recording. Okay, good. I want to make sure I was recording this as well. So share screens again. Let's see, I'm gonna do. All right, there we go. Gotta hide the floating meeting controls, otherwise I can't see my screen. So the property of Montpelier we're located between essentially Fredericksburg is over in this direction, and for the state of Virginia. Here's Virginia right here. We're to the northeast or the northwest of Richmond, and kind of a little bit to the northeast of Monticello, and then directly east or directly west of Fredericksburg. And for the property, we've got around 2,700 acres that make up Montpelier today. And back in the day, the brown outline is the property for Montpelier that's owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. This was given to the National Trust by the DuPont family, Marion DuPont Scott, in 1984. And this outline of the property right here, this white dashed line that I'm outlining right here, this was the extent of the Madison family land holdings in the late 18th and early 19th century. And so today we own the core of that property. And some of the sites we're going to be working on, when you zoom in, you can see, for example, Tessa was just talking about the Doc Madison house. We're going to be recording this building right here. This is a picture from about 10 years ago with the asbestos shingling on it. But it's a house from the 1850s. You can see these handmade brick chimneys that are on it. And the other building we're going to be looking at is one of the race barns that today it looks to be in pretty good shape in this picture because it's 10 years ago, but it's in considerably poorer shape today. And this is from the late 20s, from Marion DuPont Scott's time in creating the flat track that was created in the mid 1920s, and this race barn complex was built. But to put all this into perspective, when most visitors come to Montpelier, what they focus on is the historic core, or the visitor core. And this goes, you get the visitor center right in the middle of this, and you've got the main house that most people, see and are kind of center their visit around with the house tour. And most people might walk up to where the temple is to the north, and it's associated with Ice House that's below it. And then for some of the more adventurous, they'll get down to the Madison Family Cemetery. And of course, right beside the Madison Family Cemetery, we've got the excavations that we're doing right now at the overseer's house. Here's the Madison Family Cemetery right here with a brick wall. Here are the excavations we're doing. This is the final season of excavations there. And then here's the visitor center, the main house, and then the temple right over here. So this gives kind of a snapshot view of this visitor core. And what you all are going to be able to experience with the expedition this coming November, in about 3 weeks, is the larger property and some of this DuPont era heritage. But what I wanted to do was step through a pretty quick thumbnail sketch of the history of the property. And I've sent you all readings that go into, pretty much from prehistoric times all the way into the DuPont era, but a focus on the Madison era. And so a lot of that you're gonna experience when you're here, because we'll do some property tours, and then a lot of what you're going to be doing is focusing on the architecture of the DuPont period. But for the period of ownership during the Madison ownership, from the 1720s to 1844, you've got 3 generations of Madisons that own Montpelier. And one of the first generations is Frances Madison. She was the grandmother of the president, and she occupies and arranges to have the Mount Pleasant complex be built. And when the land that makes up Montpelier during the Madison era was pretty much all acquired from the Taylor family, and that's Frances Taylor Madison. That's her father's land that was acquired when she married Ambrose Madison. And of course, when they moved here in 1732 from the Piedmont, within 6 months, Ambrose Madison, her husband, dies. He's allegedly, according to court documents, poisoned by 2 of their slaves and a neighboring slave. And then she pretty much runs Montpelier on her own for the next 30 years and markets the tobacco under her own name. And so during this time, most of the agricultural operations that are surrounded the horticultural operations of growing tobacco and then selling it. And up until the 1760s, the early 1760s, Mount Pleasant is the kind of the home place for the Madison family. And then in the 1760s, this is when the main core of the main house is built. And this is arranged to be built by James Madison's parents, James Madison Sr. and Nellie Conway Madison, James Madison's mom. And what they arranged to build is this Georgian home that is, has the Georgian symmetry. It's more along the lines of a kind of a mini Stratford Hall with the outbuildings that are out front, and this Georgian landscape. And as you all know, some of the earlier history that goes back to 1750 surrounds the kitchen, which is what turns out to be the planter's cottage that his parents move into when they're first married. So instead of living down at Mount Pleasant, about a quarter of a mile from the main house, they arranged to have this this smaller building built that would have looked something like this, and that we've done the archaeology on and found everything from the top of the chimney to all of the foundation for this building that gave us evidence of some of the earlier period for when James Madison was a boy. And then in amongst this, what we've got is, when you get into the retirement years of James and Dolly Madison, this is when the wings are added onto the house, and you get this picturesque landscape that, where you've got the plantings that surround the house, all the outbuildings that are in front of the house are taken down. The blacksmith shop that used to be over where the temple is, that's moved out to the farm complex. And then what we found back in 2008 was evidence for the South Yard, or this area of living homes for the enslaved domestics, and then also their workspaces as well. And we've spent a lot of years doing excavations there and have learned a lot about the architecture of this area, like in terms of the early 19th century. And the archaeology that we did in this area was particularly revealing in terms of, what the architecture in the early 19th century looked like with the, for outbuildings, these brick piers, and then how it can, this is, for example, a photograph of the excavations we did, the duplexes in this area. These are these buildings that are right here. So these two buildings that we've reconstructed are based on the archaeology that we did right here. And then the work that we did on later on with the north dwelling, and then the kitchen, which you can see reconstructed right here, the kitchen right here and the north dwelling right here. These are this architecture that has, continuous brick foundations that are more typical of mid-18th century architecture. And so, with so much of what we've done, we've been able to really get a good understanding of this 18th and early 19th century architecture. And then more recently, we've done a lot of work on the area below the visitor center. That's the focus of what was called at the time the home farm, or the main farm complex. And this farm complex is a 30-acre area of buildings that consists of all kinds of tobacco barns, threshing barns, stables. We've got a blacksmith shop, and then this image right here shows an artist or a 3D reconstruction of what this would have looked like back in the day. And again, spent the last 2 years, we've spent a lot of time at the overseer's house, and we're finishing up those excavations. And actually, when you all are here, we'll definitely make our way out to the site, because we've got the site will still be open, and we'll be doing excavations there. And we'll look at some of the architectural features that we're excavating in that location. So So Dean or Pat, do you have anything to add to this with the architecture, or what some of what you all have seen?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what to add. I remember the last time I was there, we went into a large barn, which was not this barn that's shown on in this picture, but it was over closer to Constitutional Village. And is that the barn we're going to be working in?
Yeah, that I was going to get into some of that right now.
Not to, yeah,
That's
not
perfect. Yeah, I think that
off the
barn,
topic.
it might have been the schooling barn. Was it this one?
Yeah, it's the one that they filmed a movie in at one time.
Oh, Hannibal. Yeah, this is that barn right there.
Yeah, that's it.
I wish I had pictures of the Hannibal set. I'll have to look through and see if I do, because that was amazing. That was the first summer I was here, the June of 2000. That barn was modified for the set for Hannibal. But yeah, this area that you're talking about down here is the 20th century counterpart. This farm complex that's down here, all this collection of barns, this essentially replaces the barn complex over here when Dolly Madison sells the property in 1844. So when Dolly Madison sells the property in 1844, that's when this plat is created, showing the overseer's house to basically to the west of the main house, somewhere between the mill and the main house. And the mill would have been down in this area. Mill is right in this area. And so all this farm complex beginning in 1844 is abandoned, and then a new farm complex is built over here. And in fact, one of the earlier barns that was here when I started, this is an 1850s barn that unfortunately was taken down in 2008. But it was just a fantastic piece of architecture. But what was going to be needed to stabilize this was beyond Montpelier's means. But one of the changes that really reflects land use is what happens to the enslaved community here at Montpelier. So from the 1780s up through the 1820s and 30s, there were about 100 to 120 enslaved individuals that lived and worked at Montpelier. And the main area of focus during that time was basically between the main house here down to the farm complex down in this area where the homes for enslaved blacksmiths were. So all this area was really the center of operations throughout the 18th into the early 19th century. And then when you move into the 1840s and 50s, the focus shifts into this area between the main house and this collection of buildings that's down in this area down here. And actually, I've got some great photos of this area from the DuPont period, that shows some of these buildings in this area. This is a shot from across the pond of the powerhouse and the greenhouses here. Another one is I think this is the one that, nope, it's not this one. Trying to find this shot. Sorry about this. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. Too many pictures to go through. But this one right here shows this complex of buildings down in here around 1908. And I'll give you all a link to this map, so you all can explore some of these photos, because there's all kinds of information embedded in this map, and I can share this as a web map. But what happened starting in 1848 is this is when the number of enslaved individuals goes down to about 25. And at that point, we've got evidence for some of the slave quarters that are in this area. And then all the rest of these buildings from the South Yard down through the home farm complex is raised or allowed to decompose in place and produces an amazing archaeological record. And then this area becomes developed. And then around 1902, this is when the DuPonts buy Montpelier. So William DuPont and his wife, Annie Zen DuPont, purchased Montpelier, and they arranged for the house to go from, about a 30-room house to a over 60 rooms. And so you go from the house looking like this in 1901 to 1903, you got these massive additions added onto the house. And Tessa is going to give you all a tour of the main house. She spent the last 2 years here at Montpelier documenting the restoration of the main house, and has some, just some great information about the DuPont period that she's been looking at. And along with the changes that happen during that time, you get all sorts of changes across the property. I'm bringing up a 1908 map. Let's see if this comes up. It appears to, the internet's kind of dragging right now. I think I'm stressing the internet out. I'm going to turn it back off. But we have a 1908 map that shows what buildings are on the property at that time. And basically, to make a long story short, basically all the buildings in here have been built by that time. And so we've got an amazing record of buildings from the DuPont period. And during this time period, what the DuPonts do at Montpelier is they basically make Montpelier into a country estate where they do carriage riding. They've got a set of greenhouses where the parking lot for Lewis Hall is today. That was this Lord Byron set of greenhouses where they grew vegetables and flowers for the main house. And then also, of course, that's when you've got all these riding facilities, like the schooling barn was built, and then this farm barn had these wings added onto it, and just all kinds of specialized buildings for the estate. And during this time, the DuPonts don't need to really develop Montpelier agriculturally, because they're the DuPonts. They're making their money off of investments from Delaware, and they turn Montpelier into this model estate, and even have an electrical plant that they build. This is what's called the power plant. It was raised about 15 years ago, but it was this coal-fired electrical plant that by 1903 had lit up the houses at Montpelier with electricity, which for rural Orange County was the same kind of shock as aliens landing. I mean, when they flipped the switch for the main house and all the lights in the rooms turned off, there's newspaper articles about this. So during the DuPont period, what we've got is all of these buildings that are built, and just some amazing architecture to look at. One thing that Tessa has been doing is she's been modeling a lot of these buildings, and she'll get into this when you all are here. But let me bring up this this 3D landscape right here. She'll go over this, but we've been developing a 3D landscape of Montpelier that models all of the buildings in 3 dimensions. So this is the main house, and this is a model that Tessa's been working on. And you can see you've got the south yard that's modeled here. So these are all 3-dimensional buildings that you can zoom in on and look at the details on. But what Tessa has also been doing is modeling select buildings across the property. So here's the hog barn right here that she's modeled. This is the old archaeology lab, which was the old bunkhouse. And then you've also got House 11 that she just finished, which is just amazing. This building right here, this was the farm manager's house back in the DuPont years. But this building dates back to the 1770s. And one of the buildings that, again, we're going to be looking at is the on the other side of the property, and it's easy to get lost on this 3D map, but we're going to be looking at the Doc Madison house that's over here. And let's see, yeah, this house right here, which is Doc Madison, this building right here is one that we don't have any drawings for. And this one dates back to the 1850s. And when this building is built, this is shortly before emancipation, and right around only about 20 years after Doc Madison arranges to have this building built, actually less than 15 years later, the Gilmore family, who end up building the Gilmore farm, they're freed, and they buy a section of land from Doc Madison and build their farm complex that their home survives today, that was built in the 1870s based on the Denver chronology. So what we've got at Montpelier is just a whole host of buildings. And during the DuPont period, a lot of these buildings are lived in by Black DuPont workers. So for example, the last time we did one of these programs in the spring of this last year, the group recorded a house known as the Page House. And the Page House is let's see, where's that? Here it is. The Page House was lived in from 1925 through 1975 by the grandmother of Jane Sheldon. So this is a picture of her and her husband visiting the house for the first time in 2021, right during COVID. She's a neighbor of mine. And when I learned that, her grandmother lived at Montpelier, started asking her questions, and she had all kinds of information that she shared with us about this building. And then when we did the recordation of this building, we worked on some of the oral history of this building, along with doing the drawings for this. So what I'm hoping we can do when we do some of the recording of these buildings is get some of the DuPont era workers might be able to visit and do some oral history with us on these. So we'll have to see if we can get that arranged. But for this landscape, again, going back to this overall aerial map, when you look at the buildings that are present today, the overwhelming number of these are from the DuPont era, but we don't have a lot of attention that's focused on those. And so with these architectural recording programs, we're not only looking to document the buildings in terms of some of the drawings and whatnot, and make sure that they're properly recorded, but also bring in some of the human history of these and the household histories of some of these buildings. So, but that was the main overview that wanted to provide you all. And anybody have any questions? And Polly, hello. See, you're joining us. I'm recording this as well, Polly, so be able to hear the recording of this. But again, we're gonna Tessa is going to be arranging to have you all have a lecture on early 20th century architecture with some of the Rosenwald schools and the work that's being done on those. And again, a lot of this is, we're looking to document this 20th century history here at Montpelier, because what it turns out is that a lot of the families that were working at Montpelier in the early 20th century actually have connections with the Madison era history. So for example, this is a shot of Leroy Johnson being interviewed by Becca Davis. And Leroy Johnson, his family resided in what's called the Johnson House, Sarah Johnson House today. This is over on the eastern part of the property. And this is a shot of that building right here. And we also produced a 3D model of this building that can be seen on this map right here. So this house right here, this shot that looking on the screen porch right there, this is looking in this direction right here. So I'm getting lost in all my tabs right here, but this is looking into the porch right here. But Leroy Johnson has memories of being told about the burial ground that we're doing studies on right now, which is the burial ground for the enslaved community that we're doing surveys on. And this is just down the hill from the visitor center, and the Montpelier burial ground is a site that we've done remote sensing on GPR, and we've found literally hundreds of graves. This is a shot from last week of the GPR that's happening, ground penetrating radar. And while there's no documentation for much of the lives of the enslaved except through the archaeology, what we're finding is that the connections with the oral histories bring this history alive, and a lot of the descendants who were working for the DuPonts, Black DuPont workers, are descendants of the enslaved at Montpelier. And this is some of the strongest connections they have to Montpelier is not through their memories going back to the period of enslavement. It's more from the DuPont period. And so what we're finding is doing the oral histories on this DuPont period and documenting that is giving us a connection with the Madison period, just because when you do these oral histories, you have to go from the the most recent memories on back. And it's beginning to, build a community that we're working on with the Montpelier Descendant Committee to really, flesh out this Madison era history in a whole new way. I mean, a lot of the histories that are out there, the oral histories that are out there, I mean, it's similar to the archaeology. You look at this landscape, and today, it's a field, but back in the Madison era, it was a whole complex of buildings. There's, in this shot right here, there are 20 buildings that were out here. And it's only when you start digging below the surface and doing the archaeology that you begin uncovering these. And then it's the same with the oral histories. You start talking with the local community, and more of these histories come out. So what's really exciting about documenting these DuPont era houses is that the individuals like Leroy Johnson have some really incredible memories dating back to the early to mid 20th century. And so we're gathering all kinds of information that we wouldn't ever expect to have gathered about the Madison period, as we work with folks. So, but that's I'm going to stop sharing screens right here, and wanted to see if anybody had any questions or comments about, what you all are going to be doing this next week, or the second week in November.
Well, I have a question about the use of drones. Are we going to be, or to what extent are drones being used for this project at this point? Aerial photography of some kind of that is either to locate structures that have already more or less disappeared from the lands, from view.
It's the main way we're using drones is to get overhead shots. So
like the ones you've been showing us, right? I mean,
yeah, those the shots that I showed, like right here, this one, for example, this is a drone shot. But for the architectural recordation, when you look at some of these the buildings and the photographs of the roofs, these are done with a drone. And then Tessa is able to sew photography that was done on the ground with the drone shots together to make these composite buildings that she's been building in SketchUp. So this is like a composite of ground drawings, ground photographs, but then also the drone shots as well. So that's incredibly useful for this. And when you go over to like for example, Tags Island. If I zoom out here, get this oriented correctly, over at Tags Island, which you all might know, it's just off of Route 20. Here's Arlington House over here. Here's Arlington, and then Tags Island is this community of buildings right here. She was able to use the drone to get shots of these buildings, and she's still working on some of these drawings right here. So, but one thing about this architectural recording is by a lot of these buildings today no one sees because all this area is overgrown and the buildings are abandoned. And by making these 3D models, we can make these buildings more accessible and begin to with oral histories we've used these with oral histories with people that have moved and live across the US. They've gotten become very interested in some of their family homes with these 3D models. So all kinds of utilities with this. So
are all of the buildings that Tessa has been making 3D models of, are these mostly in relatively good shape, so they're still standing? The ones she's working on for the most part?
Yeah, they're still standing. They need like we're trying to find adaptive reuse for these buildings. Years ago, like when I started here, we had staff living in the buildings, like over at Tags Island, all those are being occupied. But by about 2010, with people wanting to have access to the internet, there's no way to access internet at these homes, so people just did not want to live there anymore. And then the maintenance of these buildings became high enough that the board decided to no longer rent them out. And what we're trying to do is there's a contractor who's been interested in using some of these as an Airbnb. And today, with the Infrastructure Act, we've been able to get fiber optic out to some of these buildings so we can have internet access. So it's trying to find some solutions to keep these from going to the ground.
Yeah.
Because once these buildings are gone, the ability to engage with descendants, where their grandparents lived, in the 1950s and 60s, is no longer there. And for example, like with Leroy Johnson, well, his memories go back to the 1950s. His grandmother was alive into the 1960s, and she shared memories with him going back to the 1920s. So, you start to get some really, detailed information about, their organization of the landscape with gardens, and so many of the patterns of life that were happening in the 1940s and 50s go back to the 1920s. And so there's the chance to really begin to understand, through oral history, a much more complex understanding of the landscape than we can just get from archaeology. So it's something I wish we had done this 20 years ago, but it's like planting a tree. The next best time is today. So we're doing it now. So, and a lot of this has come about with us being under co-stewardship with the Montpelier Descendant Committee. These are descendants of the enslaved. A lot of these oral histories are becoming available today. And so that partnership with the MDC has been incredibly important with that. And that's something we'll get into when y'all are here, is talking about some of that history as well. So, well, looking forward to seeing you all. What I'll do is I'll send you all a not only a link to this recording, but also a link to some of the maps. And I've got a guide on how to use the GIS maps. And then also I'll send, Tessa has developed some really nice websites on doing 3D modeling of the buildings, and then also some of her web maps on the main house. And I don't know if y'all had a chance to see her lunch and learn that she did about 2 months ago on documenting the restoring of the main house. I will send that link to you all as well. So because this will give you some information to understand more about what we're doing with these projects. So put a note. So, well, great. Well, looking forward to seeing you all in about 3 weeks. And if you have any questions in the meantime, let me know. I'll be sending you all out a invite for the Sunday night dinner at Arlington House, and we'll order the food from Cooper's this time, and so you can select what item you want for dinner. And this will be, I think that's going to be on November 5th. Which is that Sunday. Let's see. Yeah, this is the week of, November 5th is when we're meeting, Sunday, November 5th, about 6 o'clock at Arlington. So, and if any of you all are staying in Arlington, you'll be able to check in earlier at 5 o'clock. So, but I'll send more information on this. So
okay, and you just just to finalize payment and all that, is that in the works?
Yeah, I will. We have switched accounting systems, and I'm gonna I think I've sent the bills to everybody. I'm pretty certain, and I'll check yours as well, Dean, to see what your
I don't remember receiving one. I don't think I have, like a final.
Okay, I'll check on that.
I didn't, yeah. So I don't know.
Okay.
If you could, thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right, well, thanks you all. And again, you'll be hearing from me. I'll send you this recording, and then I'll send you individual items that you all need. So, and you'll be able to reach me on Dig. So, all right. Well, bye everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay.